Chapter 18 explores drug policy issues from a national and international perspective. A key topic in the discussion of drug policy is treatment and treatment services. When looking at treatment services for substance use disorders and addiction through the lens of public opinion and policy, some specific questions routinely emerge. These are, is treatment effective? What is considered success in treatment and recovery? And what types of treatment should be offered? Looking first at the question of treatment effectiveness, there is currently general agreement that treatment of substance use disorders and addiction is effective in its ability to save lives, families, and communities. Various governmental agencies and studies have also suggested that, overall, treatment is cost-effective in such areas as reducing crime and homelessness and increasing employment. However, when exploring this question, it is vital to consider obstacles that can occur related to overall effectiveness, making the question of treatment effectiveness a more complex issue. For example, substance use disorders can be a chronic condition similar to other medical conditions. Being a chronic condition can mean that treatment may not be effective or work for every individual the first time, and multiple treatment efforts may need to occur before recovery becomes a lifestyle. In addition, many in the medical and treatment community point out that the effective treatment of a chronic condition may require continuing care throughout one's life. The exploration of factors related to treatment effectiveness frequently leads to the second question: what is considered success in treatment services and recovery? This question routinely generates more debate and differing opinions. Some view success in treatment strictly related to the ability to achieve long-term abstinence. Others view factors such as longer periods of sustained recovery, reduction in relapses, and improvement in quality of life, such as maintaining housing and employment, as equally valid types of success that should be acknowledged. The distinction between these differing opinions is important because it influences data related to outcome of services. Historically, viewing success only through the lens of maintaining abstinence has generated outcome results which suggest that a smaller percentage of people receiving treatment are successful, while including improvement of quality of life has generated in higher percentages. So, when reviewing studies and data related to outcome of treatment services and what is successful, it is vital to know what is being considered as treatment success in each study. Lastly, when looking at what formal treatment options should be offered, the treatment field currently emphasizes providing what is called evidence-based practice. This refers to treatment approaches that have data and evidence behind them showing that they work. There is consensus within the treatment community that agencies should focus on offering evidence-based approaches to ensure clients receive quality and ethical care. Likewise, public policy initiatives and funding related to treatment services currently emphasize supporting approaches that are able to demonstrate evidence-based practice. In addition to formal evidence-based treatment approaches, there is also consideration given to peer-based support groups and their potential benefit. These are often free groups found throughout the community, and many in the recovering community have noted the value and influences these have had on their recovery success. So, currently, evidence-based practices and community support options are both regularly utilized. In this week's folder, I provided a brief summary of some of the most common models used in both formal treatment settings and in peer-based community support. When looking at treatment options, the reality is that as of yet, there is no quote-unquote magic cure or one approach, either in formal treatment or community support options that works for everyone. Quite often, providers and agencies use a variety of treatment approaches and techniques as opposed to just one to increase the chances of recovery success for everyone. Because of the reality that no one approach is the magic cure to addiction, there continues to be an emphasis on exploring and adding more evidence-based approaches as they emerge to meet the wide range of needs and preferences for those seeking treatment services. Thus, multiple approaches are often used within a treatment setting. Yet, while there is often consensus between the treatment field, public opinion, and public policy that evidence-based approaches are what should be offered, the reality has been that some approaches have been more easily embraced than others. As we have discussed in previous classes, substance use disorders and addiction is a topic that often brings about strong feelings and beliefs. so strong that sometimes they result in bias and perpetuation of stigma. This can then have an influence on swaying and clouding objective decision making, even when data related to certain evidence-based practices is provided. The end result in these situations is that challenges and barriers to implementing certain treatment approaches and techniques have occurred, in particular with a type of treatment referred to as the harm reduction approach. Included in the list of evidence-based approaches provided, harm reduction has been one of the more controversial approaches in the field. However, it is actually regularly supported by public opinion and implemented in a variety of social areas, just without an awareness that it is harm reduction. For example, a community offering free bus rides or taxi rides on New Year's Eve would fall under harm reduction. Designated driver programs are also considered harm reduction. Why? Because the key focus of harm reduction is to create practical community strategies to reduce the negative consequences related to addiction. In addition to the examples already listed, with strong public opinion support, Wisconsin passed policy legislation in 2016, which included the Good Samaritan overdose law and availability of medication to reverse opioid overdoses. This legislation is also an example of harm reduction. So what is harm reduction really? The main principles of harm reduction focus on providing a set of practical strategies and ideas aimed at reducing negative consequences associated with substance use and addiction. This approach incorporates a spectrum of strategies from safer use to abstinence. The idea with this approach is to look at ways to reduce harm as opposed to drawing a hard and fast line regarding abstinence-only goals. One of harm reduction's views is that creating abstinence-only goals have often marginalized and or stigmatized those seeking recovery who have struggled with ongoing relapse issues. In addition, from a public health perspective, harm reduction has been viewed as valuable to the general community. This is because it addresses creating safer use practices which can benefit the entire community and reduce risks, such as being exposed to used needles and syringes. While this highlights the principles of harm reduction, as mentioned before, it has been one of the more controversial approaches. There have been quite a range of reactions regarding this approach, some strongly in support and others strongly opposed to harm reduction. Some of the strong opposition initially came from public opinion and policymakers due to the fear that the harm reduction movement was only operating as a quote-unquote front for legalizing drugs. Similarly, others were concerned that harm reduction practices such as offering needle exchange programs and free condoms would only promote more use. This second fear continues to be raised even in light of data from the World Health Organization suggesting the opposite. Likewise, many providers within the treatment community were initially concerned that using this approach amounted to enabling clients. All of these being an inaccurate description of harm reduction. Yet on the other side, strong support has also often resulted in viewing harm reduction inaccurately too. Many times harm reduction has presented as a perfect approach without any legitimate drawbacks or concerns. This is not only a myth about harm reduction, but really any treatment approach, as there is no perfect approach. Harm reduction is no different than any other evidence-based practices in that there are both pros and cons, strengths and limitations to the approach. The addiction field has taken note of these questions, concerns, and debate, and has tried to generate discussion and fact-finding regarding the reactions, concerns, and questions raised. What has emerged is that often it is not the approach itself, but certain techniques within the approach that many find challenging to embrace. There seems to be more public and community readiness to embrace and support free bus rides or taxi services in communities, while a readiness and ability to embrace practices such as needle exchange programs, medication-assisted treatment, and safe use rooms has been more challenging. Implementing these latter practices have typically resulted in more resistance. Medication-assisted treatment in particular continues to generate ongoing discussion and debate. While it is still technically under the harm reduction umbrella, medication-assisted treatment has grown and developed over the decades that it is now often considered its own evidence-based treatment approach. With medication-assisted treatment, here again, there are often strong opinions and beliefs about this type of approach. So what is it really? Medication-assisted treatment is the use of medications to help treat substance use disorders and addiction and prevent opioid overdose. It is frequently one of the treatment options recommended for treating those who struggle with chronic substance use and addictive disorders. This is because it takes into account the treatment field's current understanding of addiction's impact on the brain and how targeting certain mechanisms in the brain can benefit the recovery process. The medications used in medication-assisted treatment have been shown to stabilize brain chemistry, block the euphoric effects of certain substances, reduce and/or relieve certain physical and psychological symptoms, and stabilize body functions, all without the negative effects or behaviors associated with the substance usually abused. It is important to note that medication-assisted treatment is recommended to be used in conjunction with other treatment approaches, not as a standalone treatment approach usually. For example, the American Society of Addiction Medicine, ASAM, and the Substance Abuse Mental Health Service Administration, SAMHSA, have come out with policy statements and treatment guidelines reinforcing this combined approach. So, those receiving medication-assisted treatment are ideally also engaged in therapy and/or community support programs. In general, the use of medication-assisted treatment is broken down into two phases: detoxification and maintenance. Within detoxification, the focus with medication is on addressing withdrawal symptoms and medically stabilizing the person. For maintenance, medication is generally used to reduce relapse potential and assist with maintaining long-term recovery goals. Lastly, the types of substances where medication might be used as a treatment tool continues to be explored. Currently, there are several medications used to target certain substances, from nicotine to alcohol to opioids. Each treatment case is recommended to be reviewed on an individual-to-individual basis, and treatment providers generally work together collaboratively with each client to determine which treatment approaches, along with medication-assisted treatment, will be most effective in reaching recovery goals.